Hey everyone, welcome to today's panel discussion on how to fundraise during the coronavirus outbreak. I want to start off with an apology for us starting 12 minutes late. And as you can see, I think the only people you can see on the screen right now are going to be Rod and Carrie. I think some of you may have as well experienced a couple of technical issues. And I'm going to be honest, I'm a little flustered. So we're going to do our best to get through this because we believe this is really important content to share with all of you. I know there's quite a few people on the line. And Gillian and I, and this is Bradley from Kindful, we will be throughout trying to get our faces on the screen so you can actually see us and trying to get joined kind of as we go through the content. So I want to start off just with a couple quick introductions. We want to get into the content as fast as we possibly can. And so if you don't mind, Gillian, go ahead and kicking us off with a little bit about you and your background and who you're with.
Of course. Thanks, Bradley. Hi, everyone. Gillian here. I am a customer success manager at Classy, and I help our clients be successful with all of their online fundraising initiatives. As you can imagine, now more than ever, I'm working hand in hand with our partners to make sure that their fundraising initiatives are not jeopardized during this time. And I'm very thankful to be a part of this, Bradley. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. Carrie?
Yeah, I'm Kari Trent-Stageberg, and I am the co-founder of the nonprofit consulting shop where we help small and mid-sized nonprofits with their donor communications. And I run a nonprofit with my dad actually called Strong Families. So I'm really experiencing this on both sides as well and can't thank Kindful enough for leading the charge on putting this together.
All right, and Rod?
Hey guys, I'm Rod Arnold. I have a couple different hats that I wear. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at an organization called Souls for Souls. Spent a long career in nonprofit work. I was the COO at Charity Water for a while, and then started a company called Leading Good. We help nonprofits with messaging and marketing strategy, and I still run that as well. So really glad to be with you today and share what we can.
Okay, great. And my name is Bradley Martin. I'm the Senior Director of Customer Acquisition here at Kindful. If you're not familiar with Kindful, we are a donor management and online fundraising platform for nonprofit organizations. And we put this together just because, we really felt like we started to see the need for more information in this unique time. I want to give a couple of housekeeping notes and just a couple open remarks, and then we'll jump right into some discussion topics. And then we want to take as many questions as we possibly can from the audience live and just answer as many questions as we can as we're going through this. So let me start off by saying, there's no question that these times are completely unprecedented in the United States and across the world. There's no roadmap or clear path forward for what we should be doing. And I would even go as far as to say there's no quote unquote best practices. I would keep in mind that the recommendations we're going to give today on March 19th may not be relevant in a month, a week, or even two. However, we felt it was important to offer that resource and thoughts we have on the that we have to you, fundraising professionals, and because we know that a lot of you are wondering what you need to do in this moment. We've heard from some people that feel that this is the worst time to ask for money, that they would not feel comfortable reaching out to donors during a recession or a time of crisis like this one. We understand and respect that. However, if we've seen anything at Kindful in the last few weeks, it's that generosity has not gone away. If anything, it's increased. People want to take action. They want to give money to the causes they care about the most. So again, we're going to jump into some topics here. We're going to breeze through a couple of these topics, and then we're going to ask some questions or answer some questions. If you'll look in your go-to webinar control panel, it should be up on the right side of your screen. You'll see down there's a tab for questions. Please jump in there and ask as many questions as you want. Someone on our team is monitoring that and is going to be sending me those. Keep in mind we will not be able to get to everyone's question, but we're going to try to create themes of questions throughout to answer as many as we can. And so guys, if you're okay, let's jump right in. The first thing I kind of want to talk about is overall communication. So, you know, as I just mentioned, this is an unprecedented situation. There isn't a template for how to communicate during a time like this. Can we start with each of you just sharing how you're thinking about communication during this delicate time? And if it's okay, Carrie, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So there's kind of two ways that we're thinking about it right now on my end. So the first would be if you're an emergency relief organization and you're on the front lines of this, this is your time. And really fundraising comes down to the right offer at the right time to the right audience. And if you're a relief organization, this is your time. You have your audience, and all you need to do is be really, really clear about what you're asking people to do, how much you need, what you're asking them to give. Clarity is really key on that. And then the reporting back, showing the impact, showing how you're using their money, why what you're doing is so important. All of that is really, really key if you are asking right now. Now, if you're not, like for us at Strong Families, we've been really focusing on just building relationships and getting creative with how we serve. So for example, we've called every single one of our major donors this week, not to ask for money, but just to check in and see how they're doing, to ask how we can support them, how we can be praying for them, what we can do for them during this time. And then we're getting creative with what we're offering. So let me give you an example from PBS. They just announced that for $5 a month or $60 for the year, they're going to be offering pre-recorded streaming of Broadway plays. And people love PBS. They want to support PBS, and that's a really great way to get creative with how you can serve people that already love you and provide something that they need during this time while they're quarantined and looking for really great quality programming. So just because you may not be on the front lines doesn't mean that you can't focus on building a relationship and getting creative with how you serve.
Great, Rod. Do you want to take a
Sure,
next step?
Well, I completely agree with Carrie on this. I think it really depends. Obviously, if you are on the front lines of this, whether it's on the medical front or providing, you know, food and things like that, there's a whole different, you know, approach here. And you're probably not on this call because you're probably in full on, you know, working around the clock to keep up with what's going on. But assuming that most of us are not in that position, that's my assumption, is that we have, I really believe that we have a couple things we should think about. One is, as Carrie mentioned, everyone is feeling something right now, and we need to lead with empathy and create those personal connections. I think people are craving that. So it's not just about fundraising, it's about the relationship first and foremost, and empathizing with what people are feeling, what they're going through, whether it's on a phone call, an email, even on social media. You know, how do we empathize with the people that that we're talking to? And then a couple other things. One is, I think the temptation when we get in a situation like this is if you feel all of a sudden there's this fear, is this going to sink us, this panic? And the temptation is to make this about you and your organization. It's not about you, and if you make it about you, you'll lose. And it's really I think the reality is it's about the people you serve. That's the reason, for the most part, that people support your organization, is they care about your mission. So don't get off course and start talking about we're going to go under, we need your help, or anything like that. Focus on keep people focused on helping the people that you're serving, so that they can, they're going to give to them, not give to you. The other thing is, don't deny people the opportunity to give. I think if we need to be sensitive, obviously during times like this, language and tone and really matter a lot. It matters how we do it. We can't be tone deaf. We can't come across opportunistic. But we have a service to people. When people are feeling all the negative feelings and the fear and kind of locked in their homes and whatever else, we can offer them something really powerful, and that is the power of generosity, the feeling of doing something good, and the joy of doing something good and making a difference in someone's life. And so if we don't, we don't need to hit them over the head with give. It's urgent. I think it's more giving them an opportunity to be a part of something that's going to make them feel good. And I think if we do that in the right tone, generosity is good for the soul. And I want people to not lose sight of that. This is not just about you; it's about the donor. The donor, we want people want to make a difference, and let's give them the opportunity.
Great. Gillian, what do you think?
Well, I have personally received loads of communication around our current state, and the ones that have resonated the most with me are organizations that have been very honest about the situation that they're in. And by getting that message out there early and fast, it shows me that they're still committed to the mission and they're putting the mission before anything else. And if fundraising was important to you prior to this crisis, it is still important to you. And I think being able to drive home, we can't let go of the things that resonate with us and are very important to us. This time has actually made me think about really where can I make an effort in my community and how can I make an impact? So those are the ones that have really driven home with me, and being very candid and honest and making sure that message is very mission driven. As Rod mentioned, I couldn't get more on board with that idea.
Great. Obviously, those are all really great answers. I think, from my perspective a little bit, I think we've also seen so many communications. And I think one of the things that I would encourage organizations to do is to really think about who you're messaging. And maybe it's not a time to look for new donors, right? But I think, Rod's comment that generosity is good for the soul. I think a lot of people are still looking for opportunities to give and to support organizations and to support causes they care about a lot. And so maybe even if you're not making an ask or you're not making a request for donations, just helping your constituents understand what you're doing through this crisis, if your staff's working remote, how it's impacting your organization, or maybe even if it's not. I saw a really great email just a few days ago from an organization I think that was doing mission work in Kenya, and their message was, we're okay. We're not really being affected here yet, but we wanted to just let you know we're okay and we're still acting out our mission. And I thought it was such a great message to their supporters, right? It's an organization that I've supported in the past, and I got that message, and I thought, this is just a really great, helps me understand what they're doing, and they're still at work, and that they're okay and they're not being affected. So I think all of those are great answers. So now I want to move on a little bit more around a topic around just straight fundraising. And so, we did a survey a couple of days ago, and we ended up getting 700 nonprofit professionals respond, and more than 90% of those organizations said they feel strongly that the coronavirus outbreak will have a negative impact on their fundraising efforts. With that being said, let's just hit this question head on. Is it appropriate to continue fundraising during this outbreak? And Rod, you want to kick us off on your thoughts there?
Yeah, yes, thank you. And I kind of already answered that, but I do think it is. I think it's about how and when specifically we do it. I think the major donor fundraising is a little more challenging right now. I think asking people to write big checks. Not that we shouldn't do it, but really be sensitive to what people are experiencing with their business, with their portfolios. So we got to just keep those connections alive and see if the opportunity is there. On the more kind of grassroots digital fundraising, that type of thing, I do think that we should keep fundraising. I think the tone of that and the striking the right chord is important. And one of the ways that we're doing that is we're monitoring daily, really hourly, how are people responding to different Facebook messages and ads and things that we're running. And we're testing dozens of different kind of messaging at a time using social ads and things like that to see what's resonating, what people are engaging with, because we want to make sure that we're watching what else, how, just kind of the general attitude. Things are going to change day by day, week by week, as Bradley mentioned, because right now it's still really fresh and really kind of feels like crisis mode. How's it going to feel in 2 weeks when people have just sort of gotten used to the new normal, a little bit of being in their homes working or whatever that might be? I think we have to just keep a close tab on that. And I think we have to be sensitive to not, like I said before, overly dramatize what we're doing and really put it in context. I think there are still people that need our help and still causes that need to be supported. And we're looking even beyond the crisis. There's only so much we can do to provide for the immediate needs, and the government's doing a lot for that as well. So I think we have to look at the big picture and talk about the people that we serve and keep it focused on them. But yes, continue to fundraise.
Great. Carrie, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is important to fundraise right now. And I totally agree with what Rod said. I think it is about tone. And it's also really tying in what we're asking with what's going on and how we're helping. Because even if you're not a mission or you're not a disaster relief organization, you are doing something that is helping people. Like, you created your organization for a purpose, and that purpose is still going to exist after this crisis. And so I think that's where that relationship building and really being able to take this time to report back to your donors about why your mission's important, how you're helping, what you're currently doing to address people that are struggling and suffering right now. All of that is really important, and you can absolutely attach an ask to that, because we all have needs and all of us need to be here 6 months from now. And that's not, a scary thing or a fear thing, but it is okay to be very specific about what you need and how you are directly helping people during this.
Great. And Gillian, what about you?
I think it's very critical to understand who you are communicating with and what segment that they fall under, and who knows their donors better than your organization themselves. And if you are, predominantly a younger audience, I think being able to capture the idea of giving a little now and sustaining an organization through these hard times is a great approach. If it's an older crowd, I think being more personable and letting them know that, you're still around, you're still doing the efforts, and here's, how you plan to come back later on in this year. It's very important to kind of understand how each area of your audience wants and is willing to communicate, and then getting those messages out there as soon as possible. So making sure that people know that you have a presence in this and that your mission will still march forward, and here's how to participate in those efforts for each one of those donor segments.
Right. I really don't know that I have a whole lot to add to all that. I think I would agree with all those, and I think that again, what we're seeing in the trends, even in our database across our 2,000 customers, is that up until now, and again, I think we can only speak for what's happening up until today, but donations have not gone down across our customer base at a gross level. We've actually seen a slight increase over the last 6 weeks, over the average for the last 6 weeks. So I think people are willing to give right now, and I think that it is very important that you're combining the right communication with the right ask to the right people right now during this really delicate time. So now, before we go into the individual questions, I want to hit on another topic that I know is big for a lot of people right now, and that's around events. So in that same survey we sent, we asked the question if the nonprofit professionals had a fundraising event planned in the next 3 to 4 months. And 88% of the respondents indicated that they did have an event coming up in the next 3 to 4 months, which I'll be honest, I was surprised at how high that number is. I know events are a very important and often used fundraising tactic, but 88% was really high to me. And so our next question for the people who did have events, we asked, are you planning to cancel or have you canceled your event? 77% have canceled it. And I don't think that number is surprising given the emphasis on social distancing and not spending time in crowds of people. But what is surprising is that only 50% of the people who are canceling their event have a plan on how they're going to raise funds in lieu of that event. So my question to you guys is, for the nearly 50% of organizations that don't have a plan, what are some suggestions on how they can turn their canceled event into a fundraising opportunity? So Gillian, I want to start with you at Classy. I know you guys have been working on this with quite a few organizations and working pretty hard at it. So, what suggestions do you have right off the bat?
This topic is so relevant to what I'm doing day in and day out right now. And in my opinion, if possible, the show must go on. And we need to think of a very creative way to make that happen. What we're seeing is the non-gala gala, where people are, making it a very virtual experience. They're putting, let's say, party in place. So they're making playlists. They're doing cook-at-home dinner recipes. They're having messages go out on a daily basis from their CEO talking about how they're preparing. The staff, they're all dressed up in their attire and did a message collectively through a live stream. So there's certainly ways to make sure these things move forward. And something that I want to send to everyone is that virtual events have been around for quite some time. This is not something that is new. So rest assured that people are already familiar with the idea of doing an event virtually. It's a great way to spread your mission's reach beyond just a geographical location. So now's the time, if you haven't already done this in the past, to look to others to see how these successes have come to life. You do not need to recreate the wheel here. And, we're human beings. We need connection. This afternoon, I'm joining a virtual happy hour with my friends just to make sure we all stay connected. Think of these ways that you're already interacting with your friends and family and how you can incorporate that to stay connected with your donors.
Great. Rob, what do you think?
I don't know if I have a whole lot to add to that. I think it's really good. I think the other, I like the idea of a virtual event. I do think the challenge will be the people that, whether it's like a plated dinner and they're paying for a table and those kinds of things. The reality is you may not, I think my guess would be, just as a guess, would be you may not raise the same amount of money you would otherwise, but you can at least keep people connected and keep that relationship warm and cultivated so that you can either reschedule that event or when things kind of settle down, meet with them or make an ask. I think the one opportunity or the one thing that I would consider is what can you do that you would normally do at an event? Like, is there an auction, a silent auction, or are there things like that? Or can people donate, and get creative? And like you kind of said, party in place. Like, are there creative ways to take advantage of the situation? Not take advantage of it, but to make the best of the situation that we're in, and get people to do the same things that they would normally do at an event, but do them virtually. So I'll turn it over to Carrie if she has anything else she wants to say to that.
Yeah, no, I think those were both phenomenal answers. And, Classy is the best of the best when it comes to virtual events. One thing that we're doing at Strong Families, so we had a fun run that we had set up that we have since canceled. And so what we did instead is we've actually turned it into the Strong Families at Home Olympics. And so we've got families that registered for the fun run, and they're getting instructions on us on all of the different Olympic events that they can actually do with their kids at home. and then they can nominate another family, and for a donation they get those Olympic events, and it's something that they can share and everyone gets to do at home. And so I think even if it wasn't a formal event, but it was a fun run or something else that you've been doing, there are ways to get creative and even turn it into something that creates connection amongst those of us that are at home right now would be really powerful to serve those that want to support your nonprofit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all of those suggestions. And I think, one of the things I saw that I thought was really unique is we saw an organization who, Rod, you kind of mentioned, the plated dinners and stuff like that parlayed together doing a live auction on YouTube, but they also sent everyone a Uber Eats gift card to have food delivered to their home, so they could eat while still seeing the auction live on YouTube. And so I think there's some really creative things there that you can potentially do to still try to create connection, and to still get your event off, and really in a lot of ways entertain people that are many people who are deciding to stay at home or stuck at home due to the social distancing practices we're putting in place right now. And so as promised, I want to get into some individual questions. We're going to just try to go through as many of these as we can. My team has been going through the questions that you guys have been putting on, or that you guys have been putting into the control panel. So we're going to just dive in here, and guys, if one of you just want to speak up as we go through these, if you feel compelled to answer one of these, let's try to keep one person answering each, and then but if you have something to add, by all means, please do add. So Tiffany asked, how do you help navigate the donors through this crisis with the mindset you don't want to ask for money during this time? So I think it's a little bit of a communication question. And so if you're not looking to ask for money, but you're wanting to help donors through the crisis, does anyone have any thoughts on how you potentially do that?
I can take that. I know for us at Strong Families, really what we're trying to do is say, what content do we have that can really encourage people? And so, whether it's the Strong Families Olympics or even just resources that we're repurposing right now to put out for free to just encourage people during this time, I think it's really just about building relationship. If you're not asking, double down on building relationship. And I mentioned earlier, we called all of our major donors, but we're going to go through every phone number that we have in our donor database. Wow, can't even talk. And just really build those relationships, not asking, just literally saying, what can we do? How can we support you? And what can we offer to help? So if you're not asking, double down on relationship.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think, one of the things that we've done is we created a grid of kind of divided our audience into different segments. And so we have our sort of general supporters, or monthly donors, our larger donors and corporate partners, different groups, and created a communication plan for each of those. So each of those has a specific emphasis that we're focusing on, certain messaging we're using, and certain tactics we're using to reach out to them. Some of them it's email, some of it's a personal phone call. We're recording some videos. Our CEO is recording some videos that we can then send them a link to say, and it's addressed to them specifically, and just talking about what we're doing. Want to keep you in the loop as someone who cares about this organization, someone who's invested in it. Want to keep you informed of what we're doing. And those videos won't have a hard ask, but I guarantee you some of those people will donate because just because they'll hear about the need. And so we are going to ask for money, but in time there's going to be probably a 3-to-1 ratio on what we communicate in terms of what we're doing and the people we care about and stories and things like that versus kind of hard asks. We'll probably err on the side of more communication than not around just kind of building that relationship.
Yeah, I think that's great. So we had another question. So again, we have some questions, quite a few questions about events. And so I want to kind of go down this route for just a few minutes around some of these specific questions. And so we kind of have a two-part question from two different people. And one of those is from Ben, who says, we're potentially going to be canceling our fundraising dinner, which brings in numerous sponsorships, individual and group donors, etc. Do we cancel early to get ahead of the questions from potential attendees? Do we wait and risk having to cancel late? And then I think there was the second part of that is from another person who said, I'm an event planner that works exclusively with nonprofits and have several large galas in July and August. My clients are asking when they need to cancel or how long to wait. So I think the question here is, what do you guys think about, those events that maybe are a few months out that are in May, June, July, August? How should organizations be treating those right now?
That's a good question. I can jump in here. What we're seeing as I'm working with a lot of nonprofits right now to, shift our strategies is that being sure that you're out there today and communicating that you haven't decided if that is truly where you're at. I think that is the best decision to show, and then possibly even open up the door to get donations in early on. I think if you, don't want to get out there immediately, people will potentially drop off on interest. So, as Bradley alluded to earlier in this conversation, we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow, let alone next week or a couple months from now. So going back to that honesty and authenticity, your donors and constituents want to hear where your stance is. So if you're undecided, that's fine. Maybe have a CTA there, a secondary CTA, which allows people to potentially donate early on while you're getting through these difficult times.
I think that's really good, Gillian. And I think, none of us know, right? Like it depends who you listen to and what news channel you watch and who you follow on Twitter. But, some people think they're going to be back in school. My kids think they're going to be back in school in 2 weeks. I have a hard time believing that's going to be the case. And then you hear, July, August. So I think that's a really good approach, is being transparent, being honest. Like we're holding the spot, and we may have to cancel in the future, but right now we're hopeful. So I think that's a great approach.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would say especially if you already have people registered. We were registered for an event as this kind of crisis started, and it was pretty early on in the process when all the events were starting to cancel, and it was a pretty major event, and we felt like there was a pretty clear lack of communication around that event, and it was a little disappointing, to be honest. And so I think even if your event is, to Jennifer, if you have people who have events in July and August, especially if they already have people registered, I would really, really recommend just a note to say, we're paying attention to the situation. We're really hopeful we can still have the event. And maybe you put a date out in the future that you're going to make a decision by, so that those people know when you're planning to make a decision by. And it could be closer, like if your event's in July and August, maybe make that decision closer to like June. And so, but I wouldn't be too preemptive for events that are in July and August just yet, because I think there is still so much unknown. So going on to another question here, I think I thought this was really good and something that we haven't really covered a lot. And so this is from Jasmine, and says, as an organization that relies on large corporations for fundraising and not so much on independent donors, we're seeing a huge impact on our fundraising amounts as they have started to hold back on CSR spending. Do you have any ideas on how to navigate that conversation or pivot to a new way of fundraising? And so really, when you're dealing with corporations, what do you guys think?
I'll speak up to that. We do a lot of work with corporate partners, and it's been really interesting to us that the we've had 2 very large organizations, companies reach out in the last week, in the last 3 days, wanting to set up a call as soon as possible to talk. So I think that there is, I'm a big believer that CSR and ESG, and if you're familiar with those terms, basically being a good corporate citizen is becoming a huge advantage to companies. In fact, the companies I believe that are going to come out of this the strongest are those that have a lot of trust with their clients and with investors, and a lot of that is linked to what they're doing good in the world, and nonprofits can provide kind of almost a turnkey solution for that. And so we as nonprofit leaders have a lot to offer corporations right now. In fact, they're trying to figure out what to do, I believe, with giving their customers and their employees something positive, something that's not just watching the news, and something that's, like I said, kind of good for the soul. And I think we have something to offer that. They can encourage people. If they can't bring people to their store, they can encourage people to get involved in making the world a better place and helping people who are in need. And so I think that there's a big opportunity, and we should definitely not hold back on that. They need us right now, and we need them.
I think that's great, and I don't know that I could say that any better, Rod. Thank you for that. So a couple more questions we have here. So this one's a little bit more simple, but I think it's something that's worth asking is, what specific donation strategies do you feel will be most effective during this crisis? For example, is it more just straight online, peer-to-peer? We've had quite a few people ask about, do you think you should still be considering doing direct mail during this time? What do you guys think about those kind of different strategies, and what are you seeing be effective?
Yeah,
I can jump in.
Go ahead, Gillian.
Okay, we'll do a two-part solution here. So I think the most important thing is to identify what your unique identifier is. So is it meal prep or sending meals to those in need? Is it fostering animals? How can we take away the idea that we're just looking to make a donation, but we're looking to re-engage and build that relationship that, Carrie already very much mentioned. If we can't give right now, how can we build that relationship? And let's say each way to make an ask is very unique to that donor base. So peer-to-peer fundraising, I saw an organization that did a very creative way of, since they're not hosting their annual gala, and that was their biggest generator of the year, they reached out to each table captain and asked if they would create a peer-to-peer fundraising page and then utilize their networks to see if they were still able to get the funds that they needed, that they, as we all know, have maybe already committed to. So there are creative ways. Think about what is unique to your organization, and then how can that tie to your audiences. And always happy to have these conversations offline too if there's a very specific use case here. But I think, how do people want to interact, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, I think that was a great answer, and I don't have a lot to add to that other than just, I think it's really important, whether it's in a crisis or not in a crisis, to diversify your revenue streams. And if you haven't already done that, this is a great time to do that. Because if you're 100% reliant on major donors and that giving drives up, you're in big trouble. If you're 100% on direct mail and that dries up, you're in big trouble, or online or crowdfunding. You have to be diversified. And so if you haven't tried something, this might be a time where if your staff is available and you're not just in emergency crisis mode, try a channel you haven't before. And direct mail isn't dead. It's actually kind of a unique way to stand out right now, as everyone's kind of getting spammed in their inbox with COVID response emails. A letter or even a personal note, that's something that we've been doing as well, as writing personal notes to some of our donors, just thanking them for their support and asking how we can help. Not a direct ask, but just, hey, here's what we're trying to do to help in this response time. So try to focus on that diversification and just serve really well with the message and that relationship.
I think those are all really great suggestions, and I do think I have seen kind of a thing online where a lot of people have been asking for a little bit more of snail mail or direct mail in this time when they're at home and they have a little bit more time to consume things. So I think that's great.
Can I just add one thing on that, Bradley? And
yeah, absolutely love that.
I don't know if this is what the person was referring to, but I think that there's some people are concerned that packages, the virus can live on packages and things like that. I think we've been checking to this, because we have a lot of people sending shoes in the mail and things like that. On cardboard and paper, it's very safe because it's only I think by the time it would get from wherever it's sent to them, anything would be safe. So that's what I've heard. That's what I think we might need to communicate that via our other channels, that the facts, you don't have to worry about picking your mail. Make sure you confirm that. I don't want to be held responsible for that if that's wrong information, but to communicate that on your website and your email, social, that if you need something to mail from us, here's what the CDC says, we're following their guidelines.
It's a really good ad.
Yeah, and then if I would just add one more thing. I think picking up the phone is a really great opportunity right now. And Carrie's already said this, but I think just checking in with people, making phone calls just to ask if people are okay. Do they need anything? Do they just need someone to talk to? I think I think one of the things that's been most surprising to me about it's today marks a week of our office being closed and us working remotely, is just how much I take for granted the social interactions I get every day. And so just a video chat with someone or a phone call has really gone a long way to help me feel connected. And so I think if you don't feel like your emails are getting through or your social messages are getting through, make a couple phone calls and just connect with some people, maybe even without an agenda, and just ask them how they're doing. So we only have a few more minutes left here. And so I want to ask just one or two more questions. And I want to make sure I leave a little bit of time for us all to give just a couple closing remarks. Let's see. Sorry, I'm trying to go back through our list of questions here. I think this is a pretty good one. It's a little bit more specific about communication and fundraising, but could any of you give some examples off the top of your head of maybe things you've seen or things you've advised on how you can really be empathetic while asking people to give at the same time? Specifically like through things like social media and email campaigns, where sometimes it's hard to convey tone.
I can speak to the San Diego community here. One thing that I thought was extremely creative is that one of our local organizations is asking their donors to submit, messages or videos through their social channels on the one thing that they're doing to make a difference in their community. And that one thing can be picking up a piece of trash or, hosting a whole day of educational sessions for those in need. So it can be quite a range. And then if you are to, do one thing in your community, you would then, donate $5 to the campaign. When you ask small, people go large. So I think people are a bit concerned about where the economic state is headed. And if you ask for, lower donations or sustaining gifts, so giving on a monthly basis, I'm giving up lattes since my local cafe is closed. So I can give $5 a month, and who knows what relationship that will grow into once we all come out of this on the other side.
And I think Rod had a really great answer to that as well earlier, which, just kind of revolves around as I'm like completely losing my train of thought. I'm so sorry, but I think really what you said is accurate. It's all about the stories and doubling down on stories right now. So, if before you were doing one ask to one story, maybe it's 3 stories to one ask, kind of like Rod had said earlier. And so I think there's a way that you can really show, in order to get a donation, you need to show logic and an emotion, and they need to be pretty parallel for somebody to want to give you that gift. And so I think this is a great time even to just really show that emotion by stories on how you're helping and how you're giving, and maybe even how other organizations are helping and giving, and really do a great job on sharing impact right now.
Yeah, and just Bradley, I think empathy really is about, you know, let them know you understand. Like, maybe we don't completely understand, but we can only imagine what you're dealing with. You might have family and friends who, we sent an email out this morning to all of our corporate partners, just saying we can only imagine what the decisions you're having to make to protect your staff, your customers, and your employees, and just the weight of those decisions, and just acknowledging that before going into, want to let you know what we're doing, I think is really all it takes. It's not, it has to be authentic and it has to be, you know, real, but I think just acknowledging that they are really going through it, and it opens the door for people to want to hear what else you have to say.
That's great. Well, we're right at the top of the hour, and so I wanted to see if anyone has any kind of last remarks. If you've heard some of the questions here, and as you've heard each other speak, is there anything that you guys want to leave us with?
Yeah.
I'll say. Go ahead, Carrie.
No, I think there's two things I would want to leave you with. The one is, you know, while this is completely unprecedented in the past, we have seen, you know, whether it was 9/11 or, you know, the recession in 2008, organizations that communicated clearly their impact and their need and built great relationships were the ones that survived and came out stronger. And so I think right now is the time to do both of those things, be really clear on your need and your impact, and build those relationships. And then I think secondarily is we have a really unique opportunity right now, as people who run nonprofits and help nonprofits, to collaborate. You know, don't be afraid to call other nonprofit leaders in your area and say, where are you stuck? How can we help? And kind of break down some of those territorial walls and unite together to really do some good and to really help people that need it. So I think we have an incredible opportunity to help on both sides.
I agree with that, and I think, you know, I'm optimistic because I believe in the goodness and generosity of people. There's going to be challenges, and this is a big challenge, but I believe we'll survive because people they do care, and I believe in this. You know, what we do is vitally important to this world, and I believe that you know, if you believe in God or whatever it is, I believe that there's a purpose for us to do what we do as nonprofits, and the world needs it. And so I believe we'll make it, but we've got to, as Carrie said, we've got to learn from each other, work together. It's more than ever, it's time to think about this as a collaborative, we're all in this together kind of approach versus kind of who's our competition. And I would love to be in touch with people and just share what you're learning, what we're learning, that type of thing.
Gillian, any last things from you?
Yeah, I would say let's give people something to do. If you're hesitant to do a hard ask, let's ask our communities to engage in conversation, participate in a social campaign challenge, join a virtual event. People are very much looking for that connection, and again, the efforts that you put in today will certainly pay off later on, but don't stop, keep communicating, and make sure that people have a way to engage and that you are being proactive about that.
That's great, and I couldn't agree with all of those things anymore. I think giving people something to do right now and sharing good news is something that can be simple enough that can bring people a lot of joy, and sharing where you are with things is always really great. I want to thank everybody for bearing with us with the technical issues we have. I'm really apologize about that. we will do more investigation into why that happened. I want to thank the panelists, Carrie, Gillian, and Rod, for taking the time on such short notice. I emailed them all on Monday and asked if they would be willing to do this with us today. And a 3-day turnaround for any sort of small or large event is not easy to do for either us or them. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining. I want to also let you know, as panelists, we will be sending out a recording of a video recording of this webinar and or of this panel discussion. And we're going to be including some resources from all of our organizations. We all work at organizations that I think are providing some really great resources. I know both Carrie and Rod are both kind of putting together some crisis kits and things on how to communicate better. And Gillian at Classy have great examples of how organizations are running highly successful virtual events. And then here at Kindful, you know, we're putting together even things like a quick start program for organizations if you need to get some online fundraising campaigns up and going, and content to help you find as many resources as you can to try to navigate this unique time. And so again, thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to the panelists for joining us. And we hope that you walked away with some great information and some things that can help you improve your messaging and efforts during this time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.